Hi there. Welcome to a very special CloudTalks special around payments. My name is Sebastien Leitner. I'm Vice President of Partnerships here at Cloudbeds. We have an amazing topic and agenda in front of us related to payments. So welcome on board and do stick around. We have a great session towards the end of the webinar where we're sitting down with the entire Cloudbeds payments team to ask your questions, to discuss anything you always wanted to know about payments and specifically about Cloudbeds payments. So stick around. You'll also have the option of using our Q&A function inside this application. So don't hesitate to post your questions, vote your questions up as you see them become more and more relevant in this context. All right, without further ado, let me walk you through the agenda. We have a few sessions ahead on the agenda. One, we sit down with Chris Fendley, who is the Executive Vice President at Mastercard, to talk about payment trends and trends in travel and hospitality, viewed by one of the biggest card processing companies in the world, Mastercard. So I'm really looking forward to the insights and the data that Chris is about to share. Second, we're going to sit down with Rafael, who is moderating a panel around the death of non-refundable and advanced purchase rates. Really exciting topic around how COVID-19 is driving changes towards policies, penalties, but also, booking behaviors. So I can't wait to hear what they have to say. And then lastly, but not least, Rayna in our payments team is sitting down with properties that are using Cloudbeds payments or using Cloudbeds around best practices and how they avoid chargebacks, how they avoid costly fees, and what processes and procedures they've put in place in order to maximize approval rates and minimize costs. And then we're, of course, going to close the day or this webinar with a Q&A, and we'll sit down with the payments team and ask questions related to payments, related to Cloudbeds. Anything goes, so I can't wait to hear what insights they have to share and with this group. Now, earlier today, I sat down with Chris. Chris has a very busy schedule, and I wanted to hear from him directly at his convenience around what are the latest trends in travel and payments. Joining me today from London, the United Kingdom, is Chris. Chris is the Executive Vice President at Mastercard. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to CloudTalks. And I think you brought a few slides along the way, Chris. Is that right?
Yeah, now ready to walk them through and looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, why don't you get going? I'll be in the background and look forward to some really exciting Q&A.
Thanks very much. And morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are watching this presentation. Just want to give you an overview of what we're seeing in payments, how it's affecting travel, and some of the trends that we're seeing moving forward. Look, firstly, within Mastercard, we've had a big focus around the world beyond cash. That's moving people from using cash to digital payments. And it's a win-win for everyone. Consumers, gives you safety, security, and simplicity. For merchants, it provides opportunities of efficiency and building services that help differentiate. And then for governments, it's all about providing sustainable and inclusion solutions for for people in their markets. So fundamentally for us, a foundational element for us is a world beyond cash and moving everyone digital. If you look at recent events. So let's look at COVID and its impact on the travel and tourism sector, and also where we're seeing some of the focus points moving forward. Obviously, as we've all experienced, COVID's had a dramatic impact on the travel and tourism industry. We've seen, obviously, a big compression in the business. But, look, taking a step back and looking at where things are moving from and where we think they're going to go to. We've seen, obviously, a focus for consumers now very much on domestic destinations with the inability to travel. We're expecting to see spend that would have been historically on a international basis now move more into domestic. We're going to see a big focus on health and hygiene, for obvious reasons around COVID. Business travel, that's going to change. Take myself, for example, typically I would have flown to New York once a week. I'm going to change now. I'm probably going to do one trip every 2 months and then probably do a full week there. I'll still use the same amount of nights, but I'm going to travel less on a plane. And I think that's part of the industry is going to start looking at how we manage around these changing behaviors. And also sustainability we're seeing as a key trend and focus point for consumers. Moving forward, what are we expecting and where do we see the travel and tourism recovery coming from? First and foremost, we're seeing on the accommodation side that growing quicker than the airline side of the business. As I said earlier, the domestic business we think will grow. There's huge demand from consumers for travel. Discretionary spend has been held back because you can't physically spend it. And I like to call it cabin fever. I think that people across the board at the leisure side will look to book and travel as soon as they can. And as I said, with the inability to travel internationally or rely on air travel, I think you're going to find the focus on accommodations domestically or inter-region where you can drive or use trains. But a lot of this is all underpinned by the availability of vaccines across the board. And we expect, travel to come back in some form in 2021. And, we're hoping by end of 2022, early 23, in a lot of cases, we're back towards sort of pre-COVID levels. It's a challenging time, there's no doubt about it. But with that, we are seeing changes then in how people interact with the travel industry, how payments are changing, and the reliance on digital channels. And we'll cover more of that as we move forward here. So in terms of some of the trends, as people have had to evolve and change how they pay for things, contactless payments have increased dramatically. It's been a big focus for Mastercard for many years to get people to tap instead of using cash. And I think with the whole focus around hygiene, efficiency, then we've seen a big uptake in contactless transactions. You've also seen, as people have had to rely on buying things online, that e-commerce has grown and across all categories. And the e-commerce growth has been strong. We've also seen that people have missed some aspects of their daily life. So going to restaurants. I don't know about you, but I'm bored at cooking at home. And I'm representative in that group who are looking forward to being able to go out and visit my favorite restaurant. And then in terms of the travel aspect, we know that 1 in 5 people have missed that. And that supports from our perspective that moving forward, the travel and tourism industry will come back. It will be slightly different in terms of the air travel, but from an accommodation and experience perspective, we expect those to come back sooner. Now, as you look at this emergence of the digital economy, as it were, one of the areas that the travel and tourism industry needs to be aware of is the focus around managing the data and the transactions in a secure manner. And you'll see a growing trend around managing data privacy and also managing people's identity and authenticating them. And a key message here for the industry is to say, and look at these are not good statistics on this page. The industry needs to embrace and take on board new technologies that can help authenticate who a consumer is. Can be a combination of artificial intelligence using biometrics. We have technology at Mastercard that can track how a person uses a mobile phone. So you can combine that with different data elements to authenticate who the consumer is, and it's actually them before they transact. And then once someone's transacted, you need to keep that data secure, in some cases anonymized, in a secure manner. So from a travel and tourism perspective, whilst it's good to see digital channels grow, don't lose sight around making sure that that environment is managed securely. So in terms of an area that I look after in Mastercard is I look after B2B travel, where we use a virtual card. Now, a virtual card is just basically a digital version of a plastic card. So we're on a plastic card where you have your 16 digits. That's what a virtual card has. The difference is it's never printed on plastic. Now, pre-pandemic, we were seeing the use of virtual cards for paying for hotels, airlines, car hire, cruises. It was growing well. We had good, strong growth. We had more people moving to the merchant of record, whereby they're issuing these cards. We had airlines accepting it, albeit we did have some feedback initially in the early days, but that leveled out. And then we saw good growth in the hospitality industry for these virtual cards. However, one of the areas we did get consistent feedback on was people wanted more optionality and options in terms of what type of virtual card they would accept. So what we did is we designed 5 newer levels. So now in the marketplace, there's 6 different tiers, in a sense, price for the product. And this then allows the hotel, the airline, the car hire company to negotiate what VCN they will accept for what type of transaction. They were launched mid last year. And as it happened, that obviously was right in the middle of COVID, which was good, advantageous timing from our perspective. But we had listened to the industry before COVID. So that really provides more flexibility now with the virtual cards. And one of the benefits for virtual cards is it provides the issuing entity a line of credit. And so if you're a travel agent using and paying for services, you can use that virtual card to get access to a line of credit to pay for a hotel, pay for an airline. It also protects people. Once a hotel is authorized with a virtual card, they know they will get this guaranteed payment. If people go out of business, then the ecosystem will protect their constituent partners. And we have seen that through COVID, that legacy payment systems or models that are not based on card have ultimately failed and haven't protected players in the ecosystem. And as a result, what we're seeing now going forward is that people recognize that virtual cards become part of your acceptance strategy for payments. We're not saying everything, we're saying it's part of an integrated approach, but an important one. And we do see that as, again, linked to the digital channels, the ability to link a virtual card with a digital order helps things like reconciliation, simplifies your processing overheads, and just provides a more seamless experience. So as we look forward in terms of, specifically around hotels, some of the areas that we see are opportunities. Where hotels have co-brands, reviewing how they're packaged, what the consumer value proposition is an area we feel, people should review. Again, from a VCN payments perspective, travel agents are growing the use of virtual cards, and we highly recommend the industry looking at accepting them. And as I said before, there's different levels. So the view that VCNs are more expensive than other payment methods is not correct. You've now got different tiers that you can choose what price you're willing to pay. And at a simple level, for high season you pay a lower rate, for low season you pay a higher rate, for high yield, low yield, those sort of things. And that's how you negotiate with your distribution partners. We're also seeing then, as people are moving more to a contactless environment, there's the opportunity for people to, in the hotel industry, look at your process flow for a consumer, from when they book, when they check in, when they use the restaurant, when they check out, and any post communication, and how you can use contactless across the board, whether it's for payment or leveraging QR codes for different services. So I think as the travel industry as a whole, the contactless travel concept is becoming more of a reality and some degree a necessity. And then finally, around digital acceptance, you're going to see, an increase in the use of biometrics. There's a lot of talk in the press at the moment around health passes that will be used to manage people's vaccine or test status. So ultimately, when someone checks into your hotel, not only will you need to know, you obviously want their payment information, you'll want to validate who they are, and then you'll also want to validate their health status before you let them into the hotel. So there's going to be, impacts and things that the hotel industry is going to look at. But at Mastercard especially, we're here to help and walk you through as you evaluate those different challenges. And that comes to the end of my slides.
Excellent, Chris. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for walking us through some really interesting topics and some really interesting insights that you shared. So appreciate that. I don't think I've used any cash since March. I don't know about you, but it seems like contactless and what is it? Cashless payments are the way to go, at least during this crisis.
No, I agree. I mean, I think we've seen, so we've been, in my market in the UK, they had a reasonably high usage of contactless, but I always use the experience that my local corner shop would never accept cards because it was seen as too expensive, not efficient.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any shop now near me that doesn't accept contactless payments. That shift has happened, and I think across other markets it's the same. I think people recognise it's just simple, it's easy. I actually don't go out of the house now with my wallet. I actually have everything on my phone. I'm using Apple Pay. I've got my cards in there. I've got my identity in there, and I think it's the way of the future. I think what I'm interested to see is how that evolves into the travel and tourism industry. The ability to take that digital device and then check in, both at an airline or even when I book into a hotel, and if it links in my loyalty card. So I think there's been a lot of talk about this. I think it's hard to say that, but if there are benefits of COVID, if that's the right word, it's accelerated the thoughts of how you go digital and how you remove friction points. And I think we're at the beginning of an exciting time in the travel and tourism industry as the use of digital channels, really pick up.
Well, let's stay there for a second. I've seen a few airports introduce biometric, boarding, if you will. So at check-in, I think it's right now Dubai, San Francisco has a couple of gates. And if I'm not mistaken, Hong Kong, of course. Or Singapore, one of the two. I don't exactly remember. But you check in, and then at the gate, it's basically a camera that identifies you, and you're through to the plane. Nobody touches your passport more than once. Nobody looks at your boarding pass. It's really a biometric experience from the moment you leave the check-in gate, if you will. In your mind, how soon until we go to biometric payments? Like, at what point, you already have all your information on your phone, but at what point do I pay with my face?
Well, we do have, there are examples today with biometrics where you can authenticate a transaction. Today, you either use your thumbprint or you double click and look, you look at Apple Pay, that is using biometrics to authenticate who you are. Yeah. So you're going to see more and more of that. And it's also linked to biometrics where, as I said in my presentation, we have the capability now to monitor how you hold the phone. Mm-hmm. No two people use the phone the same way. So you can actually take a facial expression and what have you. You can then overlay it with, is that person actually the person using their phone? Mm-hmm. And you can so you're right. So the concept of using biometrics to really authenticate who you are is definitely the way this is going to move forward. And even down to the point of you can check your heart rate, and I don't know the exact term around the way your blood flows and everything else, and you can get a sort of digital view of who you are, and bring that all together. So biometrics is here, and you're right, in the travel environment, the ability, it's obviously a key security requirement.
Yeah.
Authenticate. So this will be coming. Yes.
That's excellent. Where are you traveling first? What's your first trip? Where are you going?
My first trip is, I actually have a weekend booked away in Amsterdam for a delayed weekend away with my wife. And I have a number of trips lined up in July and August. which I am determined to use. So I have to say, I don't miss as much corporate travel. I think I'm going to get the right balance in my life now. But on a personal leisure perspective, I can't wait to get on a plane or get in the car and drive somewhere. So, and I think that is the trend everyone's hearing. So the good news for the industry, the demand is there, right? It's just how we get that unlocked in the right time. And as long as you don't have any more shocks on the vaccine, the discretionary spend is there to be used, and we should come back hopefully strongly in the second half.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
All right. Well, now let's turn over to Rafa. Rafa will sit down with two hosts and hoteliers and talk about the death of the non-refundable advance purchase rate. I can't wait to hear what they have to say on this topic. Is it true? Is it happening? And how is COVID-19 changing booking and payment behaviors? Rafa, over to you.
In true Cloudbeds fashion, we have invited a couple of well-spoken and brilliant property operators from different parts of the world, different property types, to discuss this very issue. So let's go ahead and introduce them. First and foremost is Lee Strickland. She's the owner and proprietor of the Cohort Hostel in the UK. Lee, tell us a little bit about your property and what it's known for.
Yeah, so just in brief, we're a 60-bed youth hostel or hostel in the centre of St Ives, which is the UK's kind of premier seaside resort, for want of a better word. We've been around about 5 years, and I think we're known for being a high-end hostel. So we're kind of like a boutique hostel in terms of facilities. It's like the facilities of a hotel, but the shared accommodation of a hostel.
Second is Lars Larson. He is the general manager all the way up in Alaska at the Knik River Lodge. Lars, say hello and tell us a little bit about your property.
Hi, so I run the Knik River Lodge. We're in Palmer, Alaska, about an hour outside of Anchorage. So we are a small boutique lodge. We're at the end of the paved road, so we're very accessible, but right behind us is a humongous ice field. And so we have 3 helicopter pads here. So we're running guests out there to go dog sledding, all kinds of adventures out on the ice, and really anything people want to do. We also run a little small farm to table restaurant. You wouldn't expect an agricultural community in Alaska, but you'll find it here in Palmer.
Let's go ahead and get into it, right? So turning back the clock on 2020, right? Let's go back to March, D-Day, if you will. Europe, US is now sort of, everything's sort of happening. I think when we looked at our data, we had 4 to 6 weeks in a row where cancellations outdid new reservations by 5 or 6x. It was something crazy, obviously, because of COVID. Not to bring up old wounds, but do you guys remember those days? How was it for you? Where you guys were just dealing with refunds? Talk to me a little bit about that. Lee, why don't you go first?
Okay. I mean, it's not a period I look back fondly on. Sure. Particularly quite stressful. You're not used to money flowing out at treble the rate that it ever came in. So that was tough. So obviously we take deposits in advance, both from groups and from individual bookings. So all of those deposits, we were kind of asking people to hold on to them as credit notes that we said at the time would be valid for 24 months, just because no one knew what was going on. And I would say about 50% of our individual guests were happy to hold them as credit notes. It wasn't huge amounts of money, but on the group side of things, there was a lot higher percentage wanted their money back because they weren't going to be able to necessarily commit to dates in the future. They had to give individuals back money within the group, all that kind of business. So as much as we could, we were trying to hold on to it because it was money that we'd already spent through the off season. Sure. So I think we had about a 50-50 success rate with that.
Lars, what about you? Back in March, how was the flush out? Were you still able to continue for a little bit longer? I know in the United States, it sort of was a little bit different. What was that experience like?
Yeah, so our lodge was founded by a gentleman from Holland. He brought a lot of business from Europe. We get a lot of business from Israel, all over the world. And I was actually in the middle of switching booking systems over to Cloudbeds. So it was a very confusing time, refunding on one while I'm trying to move the bookings to the new system. But yeah, I mean, right at the beginning of March, I mean, everybody was set for a record year. You know, we were all so excited. This is going to be the biggest year in Alaska ever. And I refunded about 95% of my bookings by the middle of April. Especially with us being, you know, landlocked with no driving through Canada. I mean, just nobody was coming to Alaska. We were really forced to switch our entire business. We had no new bookings coming in. You know, 2 weeks before we opened, we decided to drop our rates to just, I mean, insanely low for Alaskan locals. And for 0 rooms sold for the first month, we ended up selling 120. So, I mean, we were flexible and we made it work. But I mean, this spring was just horrible and very stressful with switching over a booking system at the same time. But I mean, I guess it couldn't have worked at a better time. But yeah, I mean, we saw nothing coming in March and April.
Yeah, you'll remember that onboarding for quite a while.
Yeah,
for sure.
Chaz and I were a little stressed.
Yeah, I bet. Well, look, let's the market dries up, reservations stop coming in, refunds start going out. Since then, things have recovered some. You're starting to get reservations back. Have you seen a difference in booking window, and specifically cancellation policy? Has that changed? Is that playing into your mind today?
Yeah, when we were getting all the cancellations and everything, we were among the first in Alaska to go to a 72-hour policy in 2020, where we refund you in full, you know, up to 3 days before. And we had those people that, you know, they'd book and hey, I can't get my COVID test. You know, I'm not going to be able to make the state. And they're calling us, you know, 72 hours out, and we're having to refund them, which was a bummer. But I think that we were ahead of the curve with doing it. You know, we announced this in April, and come June, every other business in the whole state was doing the same. So, I mean, the booking window definitely got shorter. And honestly, thank God for Cloudbeds connectivity, because we got so many OTA rooms that we would have never captured before. Okay. And all of those were, you know, 1-2 days before.
Lee, did you have non-refundable rates before? And do you still have them now?
It was not something I necessarily loved, non-refundable rates, as a human being. And so because it's been something that a lot of the OTAs put you under pressure to, you know, get in with the non-refundable rates and various things like that. And it's something that I've always struggled with, because I think that even in a normal year, there's ethical problems with non-refundable rates, right? Because how do you say something's non-refundable and then have someone phone you up 2 weeks in advance and say something like somebody died or this, that, and the other, and la la la, and I could never have predicted this, and it's really difficult, especially when it's your own business, because you've got so much more invested. When it's a small business, when you're maybe operating on behalf of a massive chain, it's just easier to be computer says no, it's a non-refundable rate, end of story. Yep. But actually, when you've got people calling you up and it's your business and it's your reputation on the line, and would you rather charge that person for an entire week's stay when, I don't know, their daughter's got COVID or something? When we did play around with non-refundable rates during people coming over the pandemic, we were tending to find that we were constantly in this ethical dilemma. Not many people booked them. I've got to say, you're talking like possibly like 3 to 4% of our customers would ever book a non-refundable rate, especially during the pandemic. We'd just end up refunding them anyway, or not taking a deposit, you know, because of that ethical dilemma, really.
Sure. Lars, what about you? When you look at today and forward, the utilization of non-refundable anything, do you see it in your plans? Do you see it as part of your rate plan strategy?
I mean, as far as non-refundable to a date, yes. Non-refundable the day they book the room, absolutely not. Plans change. And Alaska is one of those places people spend so much time planning their trip, and gosh, mom dies and they can't come. And we're a small business, as Lee said, it's worth the return visit. It's worth them telling their friends, hey, you want to come to Alaska? I was planning this trip. We were so excited to stay at this place and they didn't refund us, and we don't want to be that place. Where we went to the 72 hours in 2020, we're going back up to the 30-day that we usually do, which we have some potential to resell that room, probably not going to resell a canceled room. But yeah, up to a certain date. But as far as the second they book, no, we are not into that. It's such a logistical thing to book a trip up here. We're so big that it just really turns people off.
Lee, did you experience any channel or any OTA restricting your ability to change cancellation policies? Did that play into this? Was it difficult to execute this change in deposit policy?
Not massively. We came off Expedia. Am I allowed to mention them? We came off Expedia because I find their intranet and their back end for their partners just horrendous, and their support in the UK, I don't know about the US, but their support in the UK is like not 24/7. They don't make themselves very accessible, and I was having to pivot our entire business model. Like we sell beds in shared rooms, so it's like a COVID nightmare. Like you can't sell a bed in a shared room, so we had to pivot our entire business model so that each room was private. We had to change our pricing strategy. Like there was literally nothing that didn't change. So I picked the OTAs that I had the best relationship with in terms of were easiest to use. From their back end. It's all very easy via Cloudbeds, but obviously when you're setting up new rooms across different platforms, it can get really confusing, and the different pricing and everything like that. So I came off Expedia entirely because I just don't find them a massively responsive partner. And I was concerned that if there were issues, I wouldn't get them resolved with Expedia. But Booking.com, Airbnb were pretty good.
Lars, what about you?
So with OTAs, all of them were pretty new to me. We didn't really work with them too much. We were very travel agent centric before Cloudbeds. Yep. And so it was a definite learning curve with all of them. I saw, hundreds of percent increase in OTA bookings. One weird thing is that we're usually occupancy based, but this year in 2020 we did away with that. So just kind of switching how all those systems were built and everything was something that I took over last year. So an interesting thing, but we had a great time with all of them, other than us being 4 hours away from Eastern time. And as far as the flexible policies moving forward, everybody in Alaska is going right back to where it used to be. 2021 is looking very much like 2020 did at this point in the time.
Okay.
With us being so far away and you can't drive here, we have to take deposits to keep our businesses open. It's something that we can't really give up. As far, I usually have a staff of 20. I had a staff of 6. I'm writing business plans to do everything fully open again with 9 people. So, in order to secure those 9 people, they've got to be excellent folks, and I have to be able to pay them.
Sure.
Right now, I'm the only employee. We're closed until May. I do everything. I've been doing everything since the end of September, which is normal. So, as far as things changing in Alaska, deposits will always be a thing here. We have to take them in order to, stay open. That's what's keeping food on my table through the off season. So
in a world where flexibility has increased, whether a little or a lot, it means that more than likely cancellation rates or no-show rates will also increase. does that whet the appetite for playing more the overbooked game? Do you see yourself having to overbook yourself in order to catch a ratio of like, yeah, because I typically get this amount? Like, are you thinking that way going forward as you become a little bit more flexible?
I can't think of anything more terrifying than playing a game which involves selling more inventory than you have.
Okay.
Like, generally, as a business owner, like as a manager of a, like, oh God, like that would be your worst nightmare. Like, what if someone didn't cancel?
Yeah.
As far as overbooking, I used to run a lodge in the national park system, and we would overbook there all the time. And we had a sister property in the town next to it, and oh gosh, it was a headache. Here I've had, we used to do overbookings with the groups, and I've had tour directors staying on my couch in my house, and all kinds of fun things, driving them to Airbnbs down the road. So I absolutely will never delve back into that.
Okay.
I think it's a really horrible way. It causes so much stress, and down to the wire. Are they going to show up? And they always do. So no, we won't be planning on doing the overbooking. And at least for another year, that won't be a problem. I mean, hopefully it is. But yeah, I mean, we work with some great partners in the area. If we are to be overbooked, I have places to send folks rather than taking in that money to scramble and have to drive them in my own car. I mean, it's just not worth the headache for us.
I want to thank you both for spending some time today, allowing me to berate you with some questions regarding this topic. And thank you very much again. Good luck with the rest of this year. Hopefully it turns around, and again, you have a great reopening here coming soon. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Have a great day.
Bye.
In a few minutes, we are sitting down with the entire payments team to ask and review your questions that you may have posted. So go on, ask and submit your questions in the Q&A function. We can't wait to challenge our team with the biggest and toughest questions. So why don't you go ahead and submit your questions now? All right, before we go into Q&A, let's turn it over to Rayna. Rayna has a great topic, very important topic, how to avoid chargebacks, costly chargebacks, and how to increase the processing, the merchant processing accuracy and efficiency, if you will. So Rayna, why don't I turn it over to you?
Good morning. Again, thank you, ladies, so much for agreeing to participate in our fireside chat at Cloudbeds. And I wanted to start by giving an introduction. We have Rebecca Jones from Pine Creek Estate that's located in Oregon, Illinois. And we have Adrianna Poulmentis from Southampton, New York. The name of her property is the Ocean View Terrace. So if you both could start, we'll start with Adrianna. Just a quick introduction of yourself and your property, and then we'll flow to Rebecca.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Adrianna, and I do own the property with my husband, John. He's not with us here today, but like Rayna said, it's called the Ocean View Terrace. We're located in Southampton, like she had said. And we're basically an inn by the beach, which makes our little spot pretty special over here in the Hamptons.
Awesome. I am Rebecca, and I'm the owner of Pine Creek Escape. We have 3 cabins located about 90 miles west of Chicago, out in a little town that's surrounded by state parks, with a river flowing through, and lots of wildlife. So a good spot for everyone to be right now with everything going on. So yes, that's a little bit about us.
Okay. Yeah, could you just share some quick information, just a quick little brief information on how chargebacks impact your business, because I know it takes time out of your day to respond to them and handle them and research all of the information. So we can start with Rebecca, and just give us a quick some insight on how you handle chargebacks and how they impact your business.
Sure. Well, chargebacks are painful because in our case, the guest has not stayed with us yet. So we charge the month prior to when they're checking in. So we haven't collected a signature at this point in time. So they've agreed online that they have consented to the charge, but then receiving that charge back, we don't have some of the documentation that is recommended by, by your company to have in order to fight the chargeback. So it makes it a bit painful on our end to be able to get that money. The good news is they haven't stayed yet, so we still have time to resolve it with the guest.
Okay. And Adrianna, how about you? What are your experiences and how it impacts your business?
Well, our chargebacks are actually a little different, whereas hers are before the guest stays. Ours is actually, it comes after the guest has stayed. So the best way that we have tried to put together to kind of combat that was that we send out our registration forms via DocuSign the moment they make a reservation and they have their confirmation. So we actually receive registration forms with signatures and initials on their registration form showing the grand total and their deposit amount. So for the most part, we have gotten to be able to cover our bases when it comes to the charges that guests have agreed to. So that's been one of our tips, or one of our ways that we have actually been able to get away from having any chargebacks, because we've had guests already acknowledge their payment via DocuSign before they've even checked in. So if anything, it ends up being afterwards, them saying it may be a fraudulent charge or so.
That's an interesting viewpoint. I've never heard of a hotelier getting a DocuSign prior to the stay, but I like that, because you are able to map out your terms and conditions, your refund policy and everything up front, and the cardholder is technically agreeing to all of that, and authorizing the transaction. I mean, I think that's an excellent tangible information for merchants. I would have never thought of that, but I think that's great, and it's helped you all along the way.
Yeah, tremendously. Yeah, absolutely. It's we were doing the paper route before, but my husband and I are very tech savvy and I guess forward thinking, that we just decided DocuSign's the best way to cut out paper and to cut down on any chargebacks or any of those.
Yeah, because the cardholder, you can get the DocuSign on your phone, your mobile device, your tablet or whatever, sign it and send it back. So there's really no huge impact as far as the time is concerned for booking the reservation. So
I have one other tip that has helped our property is when they book and we send out a confirmation, we let them know what the charge will look like on their bank account. So that has helped, because some of it was confusion. They weren't recognizing the property name or the Cloudbeds name ahead of their charge. So they weren't recognizing where that came from. So we've let them all know. Sometimes they read it, sometimes they don't, but we put it in an email. So it says you will see a charge on your bank account as Cloudbeds, Pine Creek Escape, or whatever that is. And that has helped with some of the confusion, more so for us on the older generation. They're checking their statement, really looking and then saying, well, I don't know what that is. And so some of it was confusion, and that really helped clear up some of the confusion.
That's a great point, because we always tell merchants, we help. I've always reviewed the accounts when they're approved. So I want to make sure that descriptor makes sense, because that does lead to chargebacks as a merchant saying, okay, what is Ocean View? Not remembering that it's Ocean View Terrace that they stayed at, or like you said, having Cloudbeds in front of your property name could cause some confusion. So yeah, in the confirmation, I think that's a great point, Rebecca, to say, oh, on your statement, you will see Cloudbeds, Pine Creek Escapes, or Cloudbeds, Ocean View, Terrace. And that would really help cardholders to really, oh, okay, yes, I do remember I did stay there. Yeah, because I admit I don't check my statements at all.
I don't either, but I think there is a generation that does, and that's fabulous.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just making sure it has. And I know, Rayna, you were helpful when I was first coming on board to help me with that descriptor. And it is, we are able to change it. So that's good for people to know.
Yeah. And when you all, a cardholder checks in, I always tell merchants to verify that credit card that they provided when they booked the reservation, and also to verify the ID, the government issued ID, to ensure that I am Rayna Coleman. This is my card that I provided to you all, or that I booked my room with. So how are some ways that you all really protect yourselves at check-in, just to verify that card holder is in fact the person that booked the room?
Well, I would say, well, back before we were actually doing the DocuSign, we were getting credit card imprint, photo of the credit card with their ID, wet signature, and video. And even then, we had actually way more chargebacks than we had this past season. And we're totally sensitive to, people not wanting to do that. So we tell them, like, if you don't want to do it, via DocuSign, you're more than welcome to come into the office. So people like having that option to be able to either do it via DocuSign or come into the office. But to be honest, I think out of the many, many reservations that we had last season, I probably only had 5 come into the office to do a wet signature, and it was the older generation. The newer generation, they were totally cool with it because they understand that DocuSign is a secure platform. And I also prefer to use DocuSign because everything is time-stamped. And I always do end up meeting every single guest when they check in. And then, so I do know that their credit card is theirs and their ID is theirs as well.
Okay. That's great. Yeah. Go ahead.
That's really good. Ours isn't that good. For sure. We do a self check-in, so we don't actually have a space that they come and provide any more documentation. So it has been important for us, and I don't really have much, luckily, knock on wood, an issue with many chargebacks at all. But really ours is staying on top of it from the beginning, collecting that money the month before, making sure that everything's good for when they check in. And we, again, luckily haven't had any issues, but I love Adrianna's suggestions and could see us going in that route if we started to experience some issues with this. So great job.
I do have a tip that you mentioned that, because I noticed that one of the, didn't happen this season, it was last season, there was a guest that did a chargeback because they didn't say it was fraudulent. They said that their stay was not as they thought it would be. They basically booked the wrong room, and I couldn't move them. They were sold out. So what I went back and I looked in the credit card description for the merchant, and I guess if the guest says that the stay, that they didn't get what they paid for, basically they'll get their money back. So what I did for this season, and actually for last season, we've changed the way that we interact with the guests. So we text a lot with our guests. The moment from confirmation, they get a text message straight from us saying, hello, so-and-so, with your reservation number, your confirmation number, this date of your stay, and all this information. Usually when they get that text message, the guest responds back and says, oh, hi, awesome, look forward to our stay. So that person who was named in the text message has acknowledged that that is them. And then there's constant communication throughout their stay when they eventually check in. And the day they check in, either that day or the next morning, we actually follow up with a good morning. We will be doing our makeups. We would like to check and see how your room has been since you have checked in. Is everything to your satisfactory? So we'll either send that out the morning of or the day that they have checked in, depending if it's really early in the day or super late at night. And that way the guest is always, pretty much the whole time they have been like, oh, everything's great, it's perfect, the room is good, we're satisfied. And that's kind of how I've kind of found my way to get around a guest ever saying that, oh, it wasn't satisfactory. I didn't get what I paid for. Because this way, again, I have it timestamped in a conversation with the guests, them saying, yeah, we're good. Like I love my room and I paid for what I got. So that's just a tip of what we've done to kind of get around that issue with the credit cards and chargebacks. So Rebecca, I'm curious, how do you say that you charge your guests a month in advance, and that kind of helps you with your chargebacks?
Yeah, so we charge everyone the first of the month they're staying. So we let them know that on the first of, if their stay is January 12th, then they'll be charged on the 1st of January, and then we process all of our transactions on January 1st. Of course, if someone books later in the month of that month, then we'll charge it straight away. But that has helped us process the charges. The guest has seen the charge a lot of times before they've even stayed. So if we have any issues from there, the only thing I would say about that is we do have they have up to 2 weeks prior to cancel. So it can create more refunds if, we're not being careful of that. So.
Oh, I see. But do you use the authorize on the payment system at that point to get away from doing the refunds?
We don't, and maybe that's a good idea. I haven't played around much with that, but it might be something we're talking to Rayna more about, because I know there is the option to do either.
Yeah, we actually we started using the authorize. So when a person makes their first deposit, we'll authorize the deposit, and then we'll go back like the next day, and then we'll put the charge through, just in case, sometimes a guest will call back and be like, oh, just kidding, I'm going to cancel. And then you're like, well, shoot, I put the charge through. Right. So that authorize button's been pretty good for the deposit. So maybe if you use authorize.
Thank you. That's a good piece of advice.
So in closing, again, thank you both for joining me today. It was really great speaking with you and getting your insight on how you all operate your business. I think it will really help other hoteliers. But I do have one final question. Once everything opens up and we can travel again and be, live our best lives, which we already are, but where is the first place that you will travel to when we are able?
Anywhere out of my house.
I'm thinking the Hamptons on that patio, overlooking the water for sunset. Sounds pretty nice right now.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And I can't wait to see both of your properties. So in closing, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And
thank you.
We'll stay tuned when everything opens up and see how things pick up.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks.